Welcome to Betrayal Diaries, where secrets shatter, trust breaks, and shocking betrayal stories come alive. I only need 300 subscribers, so hit that button and join the journey today. When I first met Ethan, I was 23, reckless, and secretly convinced that life would bend itself to my choices. He was different, steady, kind, the kind of man who would rather listen than talk, and who never raised his voice no matter how heated the moment became. He loved me more than I probably deserved back then. I knew it, and maybe that's why I made the kind of mistake that would quietly rot the foundation of our marriage before it had even begun. The first time I cheated, it wasn't out of passion or because I didn't love Ethan. It was out of ego. I wanted to see if someone else still wanted me. If I still held that dangerous kind of power that turned heads. It was with a coworker. A careless fling that ended before it even began. I told myself it didn't matter because Ethan never found out. And I convinced myself that burying the truth meant protecting him. He was planning our future, while I was carelessly testing the limits of loyalty. But then it happened again. Different man, same weakness. Another mistake that I labeled as a moment, instead of calling it what it was, betrayal. By the time I stood in white lace and said vows in front of family and friends, Ethan had no idea that his bride had already broken the promise she was making. I was sure that if I just tucked those memories away, life would eventually overwrite them with years of love, laughter, and children. And for a while it did. We built a family. We had 2 beautiful kids. Ethan worked long hours to provide, and I stayed home in the early years, telling myself that being a good wife and mother erased the stains of my past sins. 16 years passed. And not once did he raise suspicion. Not once did he question my loyalty. He trusted me with blind faith, and I thought that meant I had won. That my secrets were buried forever. But here's the thing about secrets. They never die quietly. They linger like shadows, waiting for the right light to expose them. I just didn't know when that moment would come. What I did know was that the guilt, though faded, never really left. It was there in the quiet nights when Ethan reached for my hand, in the way he smiled at me as if I was still his everything. He never knew I had already broken him long before he even had the chance to fall apart. The day everything unraveled didn't feel extraordinary at first. It was a quiet Sunday morning, sunlight spilling through the blinds, the kids still asleep. Ethan had been cleaning out the garage, something he had been promising to do for months. I didn't think twice when he carried a dusty old box into the living room. But when his eyes met mine, they weren't soft or calm. They were sharp, burning with a kind of knowledge I had never seen in him before. "I found something," he said, placing the box on the table. My chest tightened, but I forced a smile, pretending not to understand. He pulled out an envelope, yellowed with time. Inside were letters. Handwritten confessions I had once poured out to a friend and never thought twice about. Every reckless detail of what I had done years ago spilled across those pages, careless words from a younger version of me, who had never considered the possibility of being exposed. Ethan didn't shout. He didn't curse. That almost made it worse. He just sat there, the papers in his hand trembling, his jaw set in a line of quiet devastation. "Was I a fool this whole time?" he asked, his voice breaking on the edges. I wanted to tell him it was so long ago, that it didn't mean anything, that I was young and stupid and lost. But all those excuses sounded hollow in my own head. 16 years of marriage. 16 years of trust. And in one moment it was all reduced to ash. He didn't touch his coffee. He didn't look at me again. He just got up, walked to the bedroom, and started pulling clothes into a suitcase. I followed, pleading, crying, begging him to hear me out. "It was before the kids," I said desperately. "It was before we even had a life together. I've been faithful ever since. Doesn't that count for something?" But Ethan wasn't the man who used to forgive small mistakes and let things slide anymore. This wasn't about the years I had been good. It was about the vows I had shattered before we even had the chance to begin. He zipped his suitcase shut and finally looked at me with eyes that had gone cold. "I gave you everything," he said, his voice steady now. "And you built our life on lies. I can't stay in this house knowing that our entire marriage was born out of betrayal." The sound of the front door closing behind him was louder than any argument we had ever had. For the first time in 16 years, I realized what silence really felt like. The silence of someone who had finally stopped fighting for us. The divorce process moved faster than I expected. Ethan had always been efficient, practical, the kind of man who didn't waste time dragging things out. And that's exactly how he handled leaving me. The papers came within weeks. He didn't yell in court, didn't air our dirty laundry to humiliate me. He simply stood there with a calmness that cut deeper than any anger ever could. He asked for custody arrangements, financial settlements, and the house. And when the judge ruled, I realized just how little I had left. I thought my years of loyalty after those early mistakes would mean something. I thought the life we built, the children we raised, the sacrifices I had made as a wife and mother would count for more than 2 reckless choices I had buried in the past. But Ethan didn't see it that way. To him, everything had been built on lies, and no amount of good years could wash away the rot of the beginning. The house was gone. The savings were divided, but he made sure the bulk went toward the kids' future. He even refused alimony, saying he didn't owe me anything, not after what I had taken from him without him even knowing. And he was right. I had stolen the one thing that can never be repaid, his trust. The kids were old enough to understand that something was wrong, though we didn't tell them the truth. Ethan wouldn't let me. They don't need to carry your mistakes, he said firmly. So I became the mother who lived in a small rented apartment, who picked them up on weekends, who smiled through her tears as they talked about the dinners Ethan cooked for them, and the way he never forgot to pack their lunches. He was still the same steady, reliable man, just no longer mine. And me? I was left with nothing but memories. Memories of a younger version of myself who thought infidelity was harmless because it happened before real life began. Memories of a man who loved me so completely that he never once questioned my loyalty until the truth forced itself into the light. 16 years I had him. 16 years of love, safety, and a family that could have lasted forever. And in the end, I lost it all because of mistakes I made before we even started. The cruelest part? Ethan didn't scream, didn't curse me, didn't seek revenge. He just walked away. And sometimes that kind of quiet, final goodbye is more devastating than any storm. Because storms pass. But silence? Silence lasts forever.